Okay, so welcome to today's class. Can you see the slide, students?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So in earlier classes, we have seen the basics of cryptography. Thereafter, we have seen some of the algorithm of symmetric key encryption techniques, right? Now, in today's class, we are going to see some of the techniques for modern symmetric key ciphers. And after that, we are also going to see one of the key technique for asymmetric key cryptography. Fine. So first of all, we are going to see the modern symmetric key ciphers. Now, first we need to understand why there is a need to study these modern symmetric key ciphers. In earlier classes, we have seen the algorithms like DES and AES, right? So what was happening in DES and AES? Anyone? Okay, let me tell you. In DES or AES, as we know that these were the technique for block encryption, right? That means whatever data we have got, first we need to convert that data into number of blocks, then the encryption over those blocks are going to be performed, right? So let us say if we have got two blocks which are similar or they are having the similar data, and if the key which we are supplying is same, and if the algorithm which we are using is also same, okay, then it is going to produce the same cipher text, isn't it? So if these two data blocks are similar, for example, if this is 1 and this data block is 2, and if these two data blocks are similar and with same key and same encryption algorithm, they are going to produce the same ciphertext, isn't it? So that was a problem, because in a larger text it may be possible that several data blocks are going to be same. So how to cope up with this sort of situations? Or it may possible that data which we have got in our hand may not be that much where we can straightforward apply the symmetric key encryption techniques which are your DES and AES in general. So what to do with that situation? So these modern symmetric key ciphers are going to give you the solutions of those problems or situations. So we'll talk in detail how exactly these type of ciphers deal with those situations. Fine. So we must have to understand that those DES and AES basically were designed to operate. DES and AES were designed particularly to operate on a single data block. So the moment we have got a data which can be converted into number of data blocks, and where we want that each and every data block must produce a different ciphertext, so that the adversary for adversary it is going to be a difficult task, right? So we are going to see how exactly the thing like this, where each and every ciphertext produced is going to be different with the same plain text. So these modern symmetric key ciphers are going to provide these solutions. Fine. So as we have seen that the block length is fixed, okay, and it may be any n bit. Then how to encrypt large messages? So of course, large messages are going to be chopped into the smaller one, and then each smaller block is going to be encrypted one by one, right? So there are few mode of operation, and these mode of operations are named as electronic codebook, cipher block chaining, cipher feedback, output feedback, and counter mode. So let us see what these modes are, okay, and we call them as a modes of operation. So these are the evaluation criteria, And the evaluation criteria are, we are assuming that the messages which are going to be provided as an input are the identical messages. So how we are going to deal with the identical messages, so that the ciphertext which are going to be produced after the process has to be the different one. Thereafter, how to ensure the chaining dependencies, because if we have got the same data block, then how to produce the dependencies so that each and every data block produce or each and every block produce a different ciphertext. Then the error propagation, if something goes wrong in between the channel, then we have to make sure that that particular error is not going to be propagated to the other round of encryption. Okay, so that is also one of the criteria. Then the efficiency, how fast that particular mode of operation can be operated. Okay, so these are some of the evaluation criteria and which one can choose in order to define any mode of operation or in order to select any mode of operation. Now we are going to discuss the first mode of operation, which is the electronic code book. In this particular mode, a message is broken into independent blocks which are going to be encrypted. And in this
The
particular,
slide is,
yeah,
the slide is not changing.
okay,
Like we are in the first slide only.
okay. I guess this is the problem.
Yes, sir. Now it's okay.
Okay, then I will not use the pace on. Okay, so these are some of the mode of operations. So these were the things which I just told you, and these are the mode of operations: electronic codebook, cipher block chaining, cipher feedback, output feedback, and counter mode. Okay, and these are the evaluation criteria. And as I discussed already, that these criteria are the identical messages, chaining dependencies, error propagation, and efficiency. Okay, so now we are discussing the first mode, which is electronic codebook. Okay, and in this particular mode, first of all, a message is broken into the number of independent blocks which are going to be encrypted, and each block is a value. Means in this particular variation, each block is considered as a value which can be substituted like a code book. Okay, one like a one-to-one mapping, and therefore it has been named as a electronic codebook mode. And each block is encoded independently of the other blocks, and it is generally used for secure transmissions of single values. So this particular mode of operation is basically used in the applications where the messages are considerably small and can be represented in a single block. And if that is the situation, then this is the best suited method, because the messages do not need to break into the number of blocks. So if the messages can be encompassed in a single block, then this particular method is very much useful. Okay, uh, just hold on, students. Let me check one more thing. Works. Now can you see the slide, students?
Yes, sir.
Can
Yes,
you see
sir.
the slide? Okay,
Visible, sir. Visible.
okay. So the in electronic code book, this is how it looks like. So first, a message has been divided into the number of blocks. Okay, number of blocks, and over here the encryption is going to be performed on a block at a time. Okay, so this is the encryption which is going to be performed on a block. Okay, so this is the process or a single block. So let's say this one was a first block and it has been treated as a P1, okay, plain text. And let us consider that it consists of n bits. Fine. So we are performing, or in this particular mode of operation, the encryption is performed over this n bits of P1 along with a key K. And the result which it is going to produce will also consist of n bits, and these n bits are going to be the first ciphertext bits. Fine. So this C1 was the ciphertext corresponding to the P1 plaintext. Okay. So this is how the things happen in electronic codebook mode. So if we have got a bigger message, then it is going to be broken into number of blocks starting from P1 up to Pn, and the same sort of operations is going to be done for the rest of the blocks. And on the other side, if we talk about the decryption, then an algorithm for decryption will be performed with the help of a same key, and it will produce the plain text back. Okay, so the input this time for the encryption process is going to be the ciphertext, and the output is going to be the plain text. Okay, so just reverse process is going to be applied on the other side. So this is a quite simple one, and as I told you that this one is particularly very useful where all the data can be encompassed within the single block only. Okay, for example, sending a password. So sending password and all those things, since the password are small enough, let us say you can write your all password in the length of a 128 bit. So in those applications, this particular mode of operation is quite useful. So if we talk about the advantages and limitations of ECP very specifically, then the message repetitions may shown in ciphertext. Okay, as we have already discussed this one, that this one is not suitable for the applications where a message is large one. Okay, so message repetitions may come into picture, and weakness is due to the encrypted message blocks using independent. Okay, because each and every block over here is not dependent on the each other. So this particular block encryption is independent to this one. Similarly, this particular process of encryption is independent to this one. Okay, so each and every ciphertext is not depending upon the other ciphertext, or the operation is not depending upon the other one. Okay, so this is one of the disadvantage of this mode of operation. So the main use of this operation is to send a few blocks of data. So this is how, if the same data is going to be encrypted, then it is going to produce the same results. So it is the example of some sort of image encryption. Okay, since if it is getting this same pixel values, then it is going to produce the some specific pixels values in the ciphertext. Okay, and it will leave the trail to the adversary. So this is the thing about your electronic codebook mode. Am I clear, students? Am I clear? Likita, Anshuman, Sumit?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, now the next mode of operation is cipher block chaining, CBC. Again, in this particular mode, message is broken into number of blocks, and this time these blocks are linked together in encryption algorithm or in encryption operation. So in this particular case, each previous cipher block is chained with the current plaintext block, and therefore it has come, or it has been named as a cipher block chaining. It makes the use of one initial vector called as IV to start the process, and it can be used for bulk data encryption and authentication application. Now let us see how exactly it functions. So this is the typical working diagram of cipher block chaining mode. So as you can see, now this time the n bits of plain text has been XORed with a initialized vector, right? Then the output has been encrypted with the help of a key to produce a n bits ciphertext. Fine. And this time, this n bit ciphertext has been sent as a feedback to the next round. This one. Okay. And hence it is going to create our dependencies on the previous round. So this time, this plain text, the second plain text block is going to be XORed with the output of the previous block. Okay. Then the XORed value is going to be encrypted with the help of a key K to produce the second set of cipher text, right? And the same process will keep continuing till the last one. Okay. And in order to have the decryption process, the same process will be reversed. So your ciphertext is going to be there as an input, and your plain text will be there as the output. And again, we have to make sure that the same initialized vector is going to be used for the decryption process, right? So this is how the working of cipher block chaining mode looks like. So what is special in this mode? The special is that in this particular case, in this mode, we are creating some sort of dependencies in between the blocks. So first, the data has been brought into number of blocks. Then each block is being encrypted individually, and simultaneously some sort of dependencies is also going to be created in between the blocks. Okay. So if let us say P1 and P2 are similar blocks, even after that the C1 and C2 are going to be different. Okay, these are not going to be same if in case P1 and P2 are same. So it is going to be difficult task for the adversary to attack on the data. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So this is how the things can be represented mathematically for encryption and decryption. These are quite straightforward, so I'm not going to discuss them. The only thing which we have to make sure that the initialized or the initial vector which we are going to use for the encryption and decryption at the first place, they need to be shared initially. Okay, means the sender and receiver must have to be agreed upon a common initial vector before encryption and decryption. Only then this particular process will work, otherwise it will get failed, right? Now the message padding, it may possible that the messages which we have got for the encryption and the movement, let us say this is the message, okay, and we have divided this message into number of equal blocks. Let us say the block of 128 bit in size, and the last block has got only 120 bits in it. So the 8 bits will be padded. Rest of the 8 bit can be padded with all the null values or all the zero values. So of course the message padding will be done at the end. Apart from that, yeah, one need to share the initial vector at the beginning to the sender and receiver. So we have to make sure that this IV is secure from the adversary. Fine. So this is all about your cipher block chaining. Now the next mode is cipher feedback mode, CFB. Now in some situations it may be possible that the variations of DES or AES which we are using do not have, or the data which we have in our hand is not suitable to apply DES and AES. Okay, as we have seen that AES is there for a standard block size of, let us say, 128 bit or 512 bit or 1024 bit. And what happens if we have got a data where we want to make the use of AES on, let us say, 150 bit at a time. We have got a block of 150 bit and we want to apply AES on this 150 bit block size. So we cannot do that in a standard fashion. If you talk about the standard AES algorithm, then that is not going to work on that chunk of data, right? So in order to provide the solution of this sort of situation, cipher feedback mode have come into picture. So just see carefully what is happening in this particular type. So again, if we talk about the process of encryption, this time one shift register named as S1 has been taken, okay, and initially it is going to have some initial values called as a initial vector, okay. So this initial vector is going to be stored in the shift register and this is going to have n bits, fine. Now the values of this initial vector or this shift register is going to be encrypted along with the help of a key k, and then this encrypted value is going to be stored in another register called as a temporary register, okay. And from this temporary register, initial R bits are picked, fine. So from this temporary register, initial R bits are picked and these R bits are then going to be XORed with the R bits of plaintext P. So the point which has to be noted over here is the process of encryption is being done on some initial values which have been considered earlier, not on the plain text directly. Okay, so over here the encryption process is being done on this initial assumed value, not on the plain text directly. Okay, so it is up to us that for how many bits we want to have the security of this algorithm, and this algorithm can be anything. It may be DS, it may be AES. So let us say if you want to perform the encryption for 4 bits at a time, then in this case R is going to be 4 bit. Okay, so this way this can be treated as a stream cipher as well, where the number of bits are very smaller than the block. Okay, so this time R bits which have been got from this particular operation have been XORed with the R bits of plaintext. Then the result has been sent back as a feedback to the next round. Fine, and the same process will keep continued till the last block. So this is how cipher feedback mode will look like. So as have been told that this can be considered as a stream cipher because we have got a liberty to choose the variation for how many bits we want to have this operation. So it is up to us that how many bits we want to have. Okay, so if the bits are less, then we can say that this particular operation is behaving like a stream cipher. Fine. Now in cipher feedback mode, the messages are generally treated as a stream of bits and added to the output of the block ciphers. We have already discussed this, and the result is feedback for the next stage, right? So each and every time whatever the result we have got from a block, and that result is going as a feedback to the next stage or next route. And in general, the standard ways, this has been validated with 1 bit, 8 bit, 64 bit, and 128 bit feedback. And it is generally being denoted as a CFB1, CFB8, and CFB64 and 128. Okay, and it has been reported that it is very efficient if we go by these variations. Okay, and it is also generally used for the process of data encryption and authentication. And if we talk about the advantages and limitations of CFB, then it is very much appropriate when the data arrives in bits or bytes. So in all those situations, it is very good or it is recommended to go by the CFB mode. And it is also very famous and very common stream mode. And limitation is that it needs to install block encryption after every n bits, and the error propagate for several blocks after the error. So error propagation will happen in this case. Okay, if something goes wrong over here, then this particular error will trigger the errors in this as well. Okay, because we are encrypting block by block, or let us say this portion is different from this one. Okay, this C1 is being sent differently, this C2 is being sent differently, this Cn is being sent differently. But if there is something, if something goes wrong in C1, then this is going to affect the C2 as well. Okay, similarly, it is going to affect Cn as well, or C3, C4, and so on and so forth. So the error propagation will affect the other consequent blocks as well. So hence the error propagation will be there. Now, there is another mode called as output feedback mode. And this is very much similar to your cipher feedback mode. Okay, this one. Except that this time, rather than providing feedback directly from the ciphertext, we are providing the output as a feedback, output of this block. So whatever is the output from this block, that is going to be sent as a feedback, okay, to this. Okay, earlier we were sending the resultant ciphertext as the feedback, but now this time we have removed this thing. So what will happen with this thing? Hence, since we initially assume the initialized vector, okay, so that will be same at the both the end. So if this thing is common, or this thing is known priorly to both the parties, so these outputs can be calculated. Let us say this is A1, this is A2. Okay, so these particular calculations can be done a priori, or uh, uh, can be pre-processed. So that way it is also going to make things faster, and it will also reduce this error propagation. Okay, so this is why this is also one of the famous or very widely used mode, since it makes things faster and it also avoids the error propagation. Okay, and this can also be treated as a stream cipher because its working principle is quite same than the cipher feedback mode. Okay, so the advantage, the major advantage, you can say that it can function faster. Okay, and the sender and receiver must remain in sync, because if in case they are not having the same key or the initialized vector, then the things will become wrong, or things will go wrong. Okay, and the famous mode for this particular operation is CRB64 and CRB120. Now there comes the last mode called as a counter mode. In this particular mode, instead of some shift register, some counter values are being used. Okay, so whatever is the first counter value, we consider it as a initialization vector. Okay, and rest of the times these values are going to be changed or going to be incremented by a well-defined process. So if this is the receiver side, and let us say we have assumed the initialized vector as 0, and we have agreed with this receiver that each and every time some next thing has to be encrypted, then the counter value is going to be incremented by 2. Fine. So the initial value is going to be 0 in this case. This time it is going to be 2. Then next time it is going to be 4. Then 6, and so on, so forth. So this is how the things are going to be done in counter mode. Now the benefit of this particular mode is that with this, the encryption and decryption can be done simultaneously for multiple blocks. Okay, so the things can be done parallelly, you can say. So this is how the counter mode look like, and again one can choose some laser bit to treat it as a stream cipher. So the thing which you have to note that it is very much useful for the high speed network because the things can be done parallelly. Apart from that, it is not going to affected with any error propagation because all the blocks are independent, right? So no error propagation will be there. So this is all about these modes of operations. Any doubt? Any problem, students? This is a comprehensive table which denotes the comparison in between the different modes. Okay, so over here we can see that which one of them can be used as a block cipher, which one of them can be used as a stream cipher. Okay, so some description has been given in a summarized way. Any problem?
No, sir.
Okay. So again, the same thing which we have to consider, that which mode has to be selected. So it depends whether you are addressing the passive adversary or the active adversary. Okay, and what sort of error propagation you can tolerate. So all those things can be done into consideration. For example, what is the speed which you want to have? If you want to go for the faster encryption speed, then you have to go for the that mode. Now, the next thing which we are going to discuss is asymmetric key encryption techniques. Anyone who can throw some light into asymmetric key encryption techniques? Anyone?
Yes, sir. In asymmetric key, what we have is a public key and a private key on both sides. That is in client and server both sides. We have public and private key.
Good.
So to encrypt the data, basically we need to know the other person's public key, and when it will receive that when the receiver will receive this encrypted data, it will open with its private key because it was encrypted by its own public key.
Good. Very good. Anybody else who has got some idea regarding this? Atisha Jain?
Yes, sir.
Any idea?
Oh. Sir, no idea, sir.
Just now Vishal has explained. You should have listened to him.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So now pay your attention. Okay, because this is very famous algorithm and very widely used one as well. So first we will begin your asymmetric cryptography with RSA. So the RSA is the most common public key algorithm, and this has been named after the name of its inventor, Rivest, Shamir and Elman. Okay, so RSA. So this is how this RSA name has been given. So let us see first what exactly is there in private key cryptography and how it is different from the public key cryptography. So initially, in the beginning, we have seen that in the private key cryptography, only one key is shared among the sender and receiver, right? And if this particular key is disclosed or compromised, then you can say that the overall communication has been compromised. So one has to make sure that this key is secure enough from the adversary, right? So apart from that, there is one more disadvantage with the private key cryptography techniques, that the moment sender has sent something to the receiver, so the later on sender can deny that I have not sent this message. Okay, so how to cope up with those situations as well. So your public key cryptography is going to provide the solution for this sort of scenarios as well. So if you talk about the public key cryptography, then it has been considered as the most significant advance done in the last 3000 years. And in this particular type, two keys are generally used, and these two keys are called as a public key and the private key. And this has been termed as asymmetric because these keys are not equal, or you can also say that the parties which are having these keys are not equal. One is going to have or possess the public key, and the other party is going to possess a private key. Okay. And the beautiful thing regarding this public key cryptography technique is that they serve as a complement rather than replacing the private key crypto system. So there are a number of applications where the private key cryptography along with the public key cryptography are being used simultaneously. Okay. So for example, this is the communication. Then for certain things, some private key cryptography is going to be used, and for certain things, some public key cryptography is going to be used. So we'll see in detail how exactly the things are linked. For example, if public key cryptography is providing you the more security, then it can be possible, or it is possible, or it is being done in practical that the keys are being sent or being exchanged with the help of your public key cryptography. Then once the keys are exchanged securely, then the rest of the communication can be done using symmetric key cryptography or private key cryptography, because we all know that the symmetric key cryptography provides you the faster encryption and decryption. Okay. Now, why public key cryptography? We have seen that it is going to provide you the solution for key distribution, and it is also going to provide you the concept of digital signature, where one cannot deny that they have sent a particular message. Fine. Yeah, the same thing. Okay. So this is how the public key crypto system look like. So let us see. Let us assume we have got two parties, Bob and Alice, and these two parties need to communicate together. Now, in case of public key crypto system, each and every party may have a public key ring. Okay, this is known as a public key ring. So in this public key ring, Bob have the public key of Joy, Mike, Alice, and Ted. That means Bob can communicate with these many persons. Since it has got the Bob has got the public key of these persons. Okay, so initially the persons who want to interact with the Bob have provided their public key to Bob. Okay, now the moment Bob wants to communicate with any one of them, Bob can use their public key. For example, in this particular diagram, Bob needs to communicate with Alice. So what Bob has done, Bob has utilized the Alice public key. Okay. Now, whatever message Bob wants to send to Alice, that will be encrypted with the help of Alice public key. Okay. And when this cipher text is received by the Alice, then Alice will be able to decrypt this message with the help of her private key. Okay, no one else except Alice can decrypt, because each and every public key has got a unique private key. Okay, so if this is the public key and if this is the private key, then only this public key will be opened with the help of this private key only. No one else can open it. Fine. So this is how the public key crypto system look like. Okay. Now, if you try to compare the conventional encryption techniques with the public key encryption techniques, then in the first case, the same algorithm with the same keys used for encryption decryption, right? The algorithm is same and key is same. While in case of public encryption, the algorithm is maybe same, but over here a pair of keys are used. One key is only used for encryption and the other one is used for decryption. In conventional one, the sender and receiver must share the algorithm and the key. And in this case, they must have one of the matched pair of key. Okay, and it doesn't need to be the same one. Fine. And what is needed for security? In the first case, the key must be kept secret, and in this one of the key must be kept secret. Okay, and it must be impossible or at least impractical to decipher a message if no other information is available. So only if the algorithm is known, if the ciphertext is known, and if the key is not available, then it should be impractical or impossible, right? And in case of public key, again, if only one of the keys available and not the other keys available, then it should be almost impossible or impracticable to get the or to decode the message. And then knowledge of the algorithm plus the samples of ciphertext must be insufficient to determine the key. The same thing. Okay. And in this case, knowledge of algorithm plus one of the keys plus sample of ciphertext must be insufficient to determine the other key. So if we know the algorithm, if we know the ciphertext, and if we know the public key, even after that, these things must be inefficient or insufficient for the adversary to find out the corresponding public key. This is what we are trying to say. Fine. And in this case, only the encryption algorithm and the ciphertext, if these two things are available, even after that, it should be impossible for adversary to find out the plain text. Okay. So this was some of the comparison between the conventional one and the public key encryption technique. So if you go by the detailing of RSA, then it is the best known and widely used public key scheme, and it is based on Galois field. Okay, and this Galois field is over integer modulo of prime number, and it is somewhat easy. It will go by the encryption and decryption process, and it generally use the large integers, and it offers the security due to the large factoring problems of the prime numbers. Okay, so as we know, if we have got two large prime numbers and if we then multiply them, or the multiplication of any two large prime numbers, then it is very difficult to factorize them, right? So this is how the complexity of operation in RSA looks like. Okay, so this is the process of encryption and this is the process of decryption. So the process of encryption and decryption goes by the polynomial complexity, and if we talk in the context of adversary, then adversary has to go by the exponential complexity in order to find the plain text. Okay, so if the public key is available, if the ciphertext is available, then the attacker has to calculate the E root of ciphertext to get the plain text back. So calculating this root value of any value, maybe either 2, 3, 4, or any other value. It is a very difficult task or very cumbersome task. Okay, so this is why this particular algorithm is very secure, because this particular calculation is very tough. Okay. Now this is the process of encryption, decryption, and key generation of RSA looks like. Okay, so in this diagram, first the key is calculated, okay, in a Galois field. So this is the process of key generation. Now the moment a pair of keys have been generated, let us say that pair of key was E comma N, this was the public key and this was a private key. We will discuss how exactly these keys are being generated. Okay, but for now just consider that this is a public key, this one is public key, and this one is a private key. Okay, and with this particular process, a pair of key have been generated. So one has been kept and has been named as a private key, and other one has been sent to the other persons to whom Bob want to communicate. Okay, so as we can see that Bob has sent to Alice and some other persons as well his public key. That means now Alice can communicate with Bob with the help of a public key of Bob. Okay, since Bob has sent her his public key. Fine. So using the public key of Bob, now the Alice can send the messages. Okay. So this public key has been used, E, N has been used to encrypt the message. Then this has been sent over a channel to the Bob, where Bob can utilize his private key to decrypt the. Okay. Is that clear? The basic overview of RSA is clear, students?
Yes, sir.
Now let us see the detailing how exactly this key generation process and encryption decryption is taking place. Okay. So this is the process of key generation. So first two large prime numbers are being assumed. So let us say these two large prime numbers are P and Q, and these two prime numbers should not be equal. Thereafter, we need to calculate a number n, which is nothing but the multiplication of these two large prime numbers. Fine. Then we have to calculate the quotient. Okay, phi, and this is how it is being calculated. Okay, this is called as a torsion function. And after calculating this phi n, we are going to select E such that it is greater than 1 but less than this phi n. And we have to make sure that this E is co-prime to phi n. That means if you calculate the GCD of E and phi n, then it has to be equal to 1. Okay, so this E and phi n has to be co-prime. Thereafter, we need to calculate one more number D, which is inverse to the E. Okay, so after calculating this D, we can assign one of them as a private and the other one as a public. So let us say that E comma N is the public key and D is the private key. Okay, so this is how the keys are being generated in RSA. The thing which you have to note is that E has to be co-prime, and then this E and D has to be inverse of each other. Okay, so when we can say inverse, when they produce thing like this. Fine. So we'll see this particular key generation with the help of an example. So in general or in practical, these things are pretty complex. For example, if P is this and the Q is this, okay, these are the two large prime numbers, then their product is going to be this much and their phi n is going to be this much. So this is how the things are going to look at the backend. Fine. Now, if you go by the potential attacks which are there, which are possible on RSA, then the attackers may try on factorization problem, on chosen ciphertext, maybe on encryption exponent, decryption exponent. So these are the varieties, or these are the possible areas which the adversaries can use to attack on RSA. Now, in general, the RSA which we use for our day-to-day usage, for example, if you just log into any banking site, then you can see that this particular session or the interaction is protected using 1024 or 2048 bit RSA. So in those applications, this is how the things are being done. So these big prime numbers may be used or generally be used. Let us say this is P and this is Q. Then this is how their product will look like, and then adversary need to factorize this particular number. in order to get the corresponding key. Fine. And this is how the phi n will look like. So the moment P is chosen, then its inverse has to be chosen because it is going to serve as a public key, sorry, as a private key, right? So in short, this is how the calculation will look like at the backend. Now, let us see with the help of example how those things can be calculated. So this, I guess, algorithm have already discussed. Yeah. So let us assume that P is 17 and Q is 11. These two are the prime numbers. So first we need to calculate their product. Okay. So after calculating their product, we need to calculate the phi n as well. And for this example, the phi n going to be 160, right? Then we need to calculate the GCD of the number which we are going to take with the 160. So let us say, or let us assume that E is 7. This E can be anyone, but the thing which one need to ensure is that it is co-prime to this number. Okay. So if we just compare 7 with 160, then we can say that their GCD is going to be 1. Okay. Then we have to choose one more number D such that it is inverse to the E. Okay, so for this particular example, D can be 23 because the moment you multiply 23 with 7, it is going to produce 161, and when you get the modulo of 161 with 160, it is going to produce 1. So you can say that D is inverse to E. Okay, so in this case, for E equals to 7, D can be 23. So your public key can be 7,187 and the private key can be 23,187. So this is how the keys are being calculated in RSA. And this particular inverse can be calculated using Euclidean's inverse algorithm. There is a standard algorithm with which you can calculate the inverse of any number. Okay. Now, for encryption and decryption, let us consider that the message is 88, and if we got the public key 7, then this is going to be the process for encryption. Okay, first you need to raise the plain text by E, then you need to take the mod N. Okay, so this is going to produce the value 11. Okay, for decryption, this is nothing but your value D. So as we can see, again at the end we are getting our plain text back. Hence the process is verified. So this is how the things are being done in RSA. So any question, any doubt, students? Any question? Shivam, Saurabh, Nishant? Srijan? Okay, so I guess there is no question. So I'll end today's class here only.